Good morning and a very warm welcome to Thinking Out Loud at HOK. It's great to see you all here again. I hope you're keeping well and I hope all of you are very happy this morning. My name is Farah and I'm the marketing principal for HOK's London studio. And so to our speaker this morning, a casually discarded copy of the Architectural Review in John's sixth form common room was partly to blame for launching his career in architecture. Left behind by the previous year's aspiring architect, the magazine was a publication that spoke more to John than other journals that cluttered that common room. The career that followed was benchmarked by the high-tech architecture he was introduced to at the AR, an appreciation of engineering and architecture working in harmony. By following his love of the movement, he is fortunate enough to have worked with Sir Nicholas Grimshaw, Michael Hopkins, and Sir Norman Foster. John spent 10 years at Foster's, where he says he learned and absorbed the most. He also had the privilege of working with Will Alsop, where he observed architecture at its more fluid. He was a member of the team that designed Hôtel de Département de Bouches de Rhône in Marseille. As an architect and urbanist, John believes that all architecture is urbanism. Each building is a micro-city which has a relationship with its macro-parent. He believes that architecture is about the human spirit and respect for society. Socioeconomics and politics are some of the many things that architects need to learn to negotiate. And he believes that, as a profession, architects are perhaps some of the times the best mediators between investors and politicians. John, alongside notable others, helped to establish MAKE in January 2004 with Ken Shuttleworth. For 15 years, John encouraged collaboration and empowerment of the people he worked with and believes that empowerment brings happiness. He joined HOK in March 2019, and on that note, I'm delighted to introduce John Previck, who will share his thoughts on the art of slow. Thank you, everyone.
Firstly, thank you for coming. I'm flattered that you should be bothered to come and hear me speak, so thank you very much. This piece is curated with a set of very specific words, so forgive me. I'm going to have to read it. Not my style, but it needs to be said in a particular way. So firstly, I wanted to establish my position. And I can only do that with my glasses on. So we're living our lives at a pace that is becoming increasingly unsustainable, where our digital devices allow us to overlap and connect activities which were traditionally unconnected. We are expected to be in parallel digital places, holding multiple conversations on disassociated subjects. This is a relatively new condition for us, one which is now the norm and is challenging our mental and physical well-being and resulting in part, anyway, societal disorientation. I believe that life's acceleration can be in part mediated by the places we occupy and the architecture we design. An architecture that focuses on the essence of placemaking, the human condition, and a place where we talk about people rather than the personal ego. I was first made aware of the potential impact of change in the late 1970s, when my headmaster suggested that I read Alvin Toffler's book, Future Shock. Toffler explained that change was not a constant, but rather an accelerating process. In his prophetic book, Toffler described future shock as the shattering stress and disorientation that we induce in individuals by subjecting them to too much change in too short a time. Before the invention of the mobile phone and personal computer, he understood how accelerated living would challenge people's ability to adapt to what has now become a series of multi-layered social networks. There are few who have looked kindly on how accelerated change or future shock has impacted upon society. Science fiction writers and filmmakers have almost universally viewed the resultant impact of change as a dystopic battleground, illustrated by social and environmental decay. Political intolerance and the Big Brother society has become embedded narratives in which, ironically, being played out today by our current me-first leaders. Ayn Rand, in her book The Fountainhead, uses the architectural profession in the form of the modernist architect Howard Rourke as the vehicle for her own me-thirst theory, staging an individual over the group situation. Rand's character takes on an aggressive, singular stance towards the community in which he works, exposing the author's arrogance towards society and community therein. Her use of architecture and architects as the vehicle for her discourse suggests that she believes that we as a profession are a useful embodiment of her position. We have today inherited, sadly, some of the seeds of Rand's 1943 novel. This has resulted in an architecture which is at times too loud, too bright, too aggressive, and quite frankly, just too much. Ego and brand have added to the noise. I believe we need to recalibrate to find an antidote to the negative trajectory, one which is calmer, quieter, and more connected to the way people want to live. To be clear, I'm not calling for life to revert to some perceived past utopia, but rather a more mediated future, one where life is more balanced. In 1995, very interesting author for me personally, Milan Kundera, published a book titled Slowness. Through several plot lines, Kundera touches upon the themes of modernity, technology, memory, and sensuality. He considers the effects of modernity upon people's perception of the world by linking slowness with the act of remembering and speed to the act of forgetting. When one wants to savor an act, one does it slowly. On the other hand, when one travels fast, one wishes to forget an experience. I think we've all experienced this feeling at some time in our lives. Kundera further suggests that speed creates vulgarity, as beauty can only be produced with due consideration. He believes that speed and failure are closely associated, and that serious consideration requires slowness. Similarly, a new exhibition at the National Gallery, called Leonardo, Experiencing a Masterpiece, encourages visitors to look deeply and slowly at Da Vinci's The Virgin of the Rocks. The gallery says that it's now time for slow art. By exhibiting only this single piece, people are asked to dwell longer and consider more deeply the impact of the art. The gallery says that this exhibition is about slow looking and about deepening your understanding of the object and about the great impact they can have on how we think and even potentially on your mental well-being. The exhibition opened on Saturday and I think is being televised today. I believe our senses collaborate to determine our state of mind. Our auditory environment is therefore a place of significant importance. When you arrived this morning, the office was filled with the sound of birdsong. This sound has an enormously positive impact on the way in which we read our environment and impacts on our health and well-being. We may not be aware of it, but birdsong triggers some of our most instinctive emotions. The sound tells us that the environment in which we are standing is safe, When birdsong is not heard, it suggests a predator is nearby and that we need to be cautious. So we are calmer and feel safer when birds sing. Like so many of us, I grew up having a passion for music. It gave me a place to recalibrate my emotions and to share them with others. In 1978, I was captivated by one of Britain's most inventive composers, musicians and artists, Brian Eno. He realized that there were particular environments in which people felt unusually stressed. He created a composition called Ambient 1, Music for Airports, which he suggested had the ability to diffuse the tense, anxious atmosphere of an airport terminal. He layered tape loops of different lengths, which continuously repeated as a sound installation. He says that his music is not about scale, but length, and that it's not about size, but longevity. There's a suggestion here that Eno is considering the notion of timelessness. I thought I'll pick up later. Eno wants to make cities less stressful by making them slower, to be more considered, to be more thoughtful. Brian Eno's Empty Formalism is a series of audio-visual performances offering a meditative experience wrapped in an architecture through which one meanders. Eno's music and art collaborate with an audience defining space with sound and light. His invitation to explore the piece is not prescriptive, but one where the visitor is asked to occupy the space as they see fit. His ambition is to have people stay and meditate on the experience. Time should not be the consideration in his view, but rather the calming effect given by the space. The work of the minimalist composer Stephen Reich explores ways in which slowly changing repetitive rhythms almost imperceptibly mediate a composition from one state to another. Many of his compositions are delivered at pace, such as is the case with this piece called Different Trains. Olafur Eliasson, a Danish Icelandic artist based in Berlin, defines space with elemental materials such as light, water, and air temperature. His work stimulates a conversation between art and science, seeking to mediate a common ground between the two. Here in his piece, Beauty 1993, he explores how light through the prism of water droplets produces a rainbow. The rainbow is seen only from certain perspectives. It shifts its intensity or disappears as viewers approach or move away. Eliasson poetically interprets the scientific process to encourage people to go and deal with and be a part of this ethereal phenomenon. He captures people's time through his mesmerizing experience of natural simplicity. The sound of water falling and the ever-changing light slow down time. Not content with expressing his thoughts with art alone, Eliasson has collaborated with architects to translate his philosophy into architecture. Your Rainbow Panorama takes some of the emotions expressed within Beauty 1993, in particular the mediation of color, translating it into a 52-meter diameter, 150-meter long and 3-meter wide, floating halo in the sky. This translation of art into architecture on top of Schmidt-Hammer Larsen's art museum in Aarhus, Denmark, gives people a view of the city through the lenses of different coloured glass walls. People perambulate the space, viewing the changing city through the filters that play with their emotions. It's a slow, quiet journey. Nothing much really happens, but the effect, however, is transformational. I had the great privilege of collaborating with the Danish architect and urbanist Jan Gill and his team over a number of urban projects. He follows on in the great tradition of Kevin Lynch and Jane Jacobs, calling for cities to be better occupied by their communities and encouraging life at a more conversational pace. It was he who I first heard say that there was a need for cities to slow down, and by doing so, impacting upon positively on people's behaviour. Jan is a promoter of cities where people are invited to pause, talk to each other, and feel safe in. He places the pedestrian first, encourages social and commercial exchange, and promotes the use of green and blue environments. The impact on health and well-being is obvious. We need to remember that actually nature is our main client. Landscape architects, gardeners understand the speed at which environments change. They are obliged to work at its pace. Change is gradual. It has a rhythm. It's defined by our distance from the sun, our relationship with the moon, axial tilt, and the work of gravity. The gradual change is a source of enormous pleasure to those who plant and care for their landscapes, improving both their physical and mental health. The investment is intergenerational, as it links us to both our past and our future. Waiting for change allows us to experience slow time, as well as rooting us in our place and our community. It takes time, in my view, to build communities, and their engagement in the process of placemaking requires patience and a commitment to listen and then act upon what is discussed. I spent many years listening to the communities at the Elephant and Castle, building trust and delivering change based on our discussions. One of the most significant results was the saving of over 100 mature trees, an urban forest, in fact, at the heart of the former Haygate estate. This not only resulted in social and environmental benefit, but added to the economic value of the development itself. A mature treescape was an environment worth saving. So how can architects and urbanists better democratize space and give people the chance to have their say? The most sustainable places are ones in which communities have invested their own personalities and have an ownership. We need to empower people so that they are able to inform their environments and curate their own experiences. Places need to be left unfinished, offering communities the opportunity to take control. We need to leave time for people to make decisions for themselves and change their environment as they see fit. Organic, democratic change ensures that places remain relevant. To be honest, I'm quite cynical about the notion that architecture, or indeed any product, can in some way be timeless. Products, including buildings, are defined by the four-dimensional place in which they are conceived. They are restricted by their unique context, the more significant of which is time. I concede that there are indeed objects, such as the German pavilion by Mies van der Rohe, designed for the World Expo in Barcelona in 1923, that have a timeless quality. But even this epic structure fails to conquer time. Technology will always give the building away. It's not timeless. The pavilion does, however, demand our respect, driven by its beauty, which encourages us to navigate it slowly, to take our time exploring its qualities. It very much echoes Milan Kundera's position that quality, memory, and time are interrelated, resulting in a positive experience. In my view, slow time is happy time. So, taking the notion of timelessness just a little further, I thought I would touch upon the vernacular. The word does not represent a particular architectural style, yet is rather born of its unique place using the traditions and materials of its setting. The idea that vernacular looks like something old or traditional is nonsense. It is contemporary, sitting firmly within its own time while remaining cognizant of its context. It simply fits in. In Edinburgh, Alan Murray, of Architects, designed the Mizoni, now Radisson Hotel, which quietly adds to the streetscape of the Royal Mile. It is of its time and, in time, will be a contributor to a perceived timeless street. I earlier touched upon how rhythm and repetition in music anchored time by controlling the speed at which change happened. The same could be said of architecture. Slow changes in the rhythm of a building, perhaps through its structure or the way in which space connects with each other, encourages us to navigate them more thoughtfully. I had the privilege of working with Norman Foster on the redesign of Dresden railway station, a space with enormous grandeur as well as utility. Its three-arched roof developed a rhythm which we wanted to celebrate. Norman asked whether we could wrap the roof. Memories of Christo came to mind as he'd not long before wrapped the Reichstag. Our answer was to cover the roof with PTFE, a translucent membrane which silhouetted the roof structure from the inside during the day and from the outside at night. The calm, arrhythmic nature of the historic structure is therefore respected and enhanced. History and technology working together, people are often seen pausing and looking up, slowing down to reflect on the space they're occupying. I'm told this never happened before. Rhythm and repetition is taken in another direction by architect Gio Obata. Actually, it's the O in HOK. He designed the Priory Chapel in St. Louis in 1962, working with engineer Pierluigi Nervi. He proposed a series of connected hyperbolic paraboloids made from a concrete shell structure. The repetitive sinuosity of the structure, its refinement, and sparing use of materials results in a building that is both legible and honest. Its pure geometry resonates with us, being unconfrontational and yet still having a strong identity of its own. The choice of materials we build with will contribute enormously to the quality of the building we produce. This is a detail from the Salk Institute for Biological Studies in San Diego, California, by Louis Kahn, opened in 1963. This is an appreciation of natural materials used in their most essential form. It will last longer, it will be easier to maintain, and can be simply recycled. It seems that the time it has taken for these materials to be plays a part in the positivity felt towards them. For a tree to grow, a rock to form, a great deal of time has been invested. Their effort demands our respect. This is the Secular Retreat in Devon, designed by Peter Zumthor, with Mole Architects. It was shortlisted for the RBA House of the Year prize, and you may well have seen it on Channel 4 program a week or so ago. Zumthor specified hand-rammed concrete walls, which are similar to rammed earth walls, but with lime and cement in the binding. It's the building's external and internal finish. Very few of the materials are used. People visiting the retreat have said how calming the spaces are and how the stresses they felt outside evaporated due to the simplicity of the design. They said that they found themselves slowing down. Incidentally, it took 10 years to complete, and investments I'm sure few of us can probably afford. So, time's run out. Having taken you through this ironically fast journey, I hope that you and we as an industry can now reflect on the challenges we face. Having only touched the surface of what has become a more politicized position, it seems to me that society has already registered the need to reevaluate how it uses time. We need to change our approach to both the thought process and the resultant product. A process which is well managed and collaborative, uses the most appropriate tools, will produce a finer and richer city. Using time as a value generator, a friend rather than an enemy, can only be positive. It's actually not about fast or slow. Rather, it's more about a balance. Finding a place in which we can all lead happier and healthier lives. Thank you.
Down, you move too fast. You got to make the morning last. Just kicking down the cobblestones, looking for fun and
thank you.
Questions?
Thank you very much for that very authoritative talk. I have a question about the idea of the democratization of architecture from the point of view of creating architecture. All the references you made to artists and composers and also other architects are clearly works by individuals with an individual point of view. What do you mean by the democratization of architecture?
I'm a great believer of social inclusion. I'm a big believer in societies having a say in their environment. I think I've always been brought up with the view that everyone should have a view and it should be vocalized. I mean, I'm not asking for people to design buildings or design spaces in detail. I'm asking people to come and play a role and have those buildings and spaces become theirs. I've never understood how you can deliver anything without ownership. If you're designing it for somebody who has had no play in that, had no role in that, how can it be theirs? So we still have a job to do. We're here as a profession to do a job, but we need people out there to help us and be part of what we do and own, more importantly, own what we do.
Thanks very much for a very interesting talk. I particularly like the expression, nature is our client. I thought that was very telling summary. To take the theme of slowness, particularly in an urban environment, and given the correct or perhaps incorrect use of productivity now in commercial business, in economic efficiency generally, does that jar with the concept of a slower urban environment, or are the two in sympathy with each other? Thank you.
Perhaps the word slow isn't the right word. I think I'm probably calling for a better managed and a more considered way of delivering our buildings and places. I think the thing that often riles me is the fact that people rush you to do something and you get it wrong. And you get it wrong, and you get it wrong. If you just sit down, for God's sake, relax, take your time, talk to those around you, get the roots right at the beginning. Now, get the brief right, understand the site, understand the places in which you're in, then build. This kind of train that we're trying to take, so the Stephen Reich train plowing through New York at pace, we can't continue to do that and still develop products that are of a quality that are going to last. So it's also part of a sustainable argument, isn't it? I mean, okay, we need to invest in time, but investing in time is an investment in the product over time, is my view. So there's a longevity in spending time at the beginning to the end product, which lasts longer, in my view. I mean, there's a textured discussion there about all sorts of productivity issues. I can't go into those now, but you get my drift.
Hi there. Firstly, thanks for a very great start to the day. It's just a question of so how I started my day today is, I ended up, sort of cocooned on the train with headphones on. I'm sort of controlling my environment. Then I'm going through Victoria Station, and everyone is time short. Everyone is rushing to get through there. And then it's about how the sort of those spaces, if you like, there's thought that goes into the layout and how they're adapted over time. But then I consider how they're abused. So I'm bombarded with announcements that tell me to be careful because that because of the weather, the floor might be slippy. Well, it wasn't raining, and the finishes have been designed so they're not slippery when wet. You know, and it's about how can we sort of regain control of those spaces and stop them being, you know, abused and disrupted by the people that actually own them and operate them.
Well, there you go. That's a good question. I mean, little things help. For example, it'd be great if trains ran on time. I mean, it sounds strange, but your stress levels go down enormously if you know that train's going to come into station at the right time. Mine was late this morning, 15 minutes. That got me stressed. I mean, health and safety is an important issue. We have to design in, somehow, passive health and safety, so it's not visible or not audible. How you do that, I don't know, but it's an ambition. I mean, I don't feel that necessarily we can point to others all the time. I think we ourselves need to be careful of our own mental health and well-being as much as anything, and try and be in balance with the way our bodies work, and they're all different. I think part of it is sitting down, stopping, and either talking to somebody or listening to yourself. Calibrate your life around who you are and what you want to be and how you want to live. That's a great start. Then engage with the society around you, but on your terms. There are bigger issues. There are going to be people that push things to you and say, I want this back tomorrow. There's a discussion to be had. I believe very much in this mediation, this discussion about, let's be serious. It doesn't always get you everywhere, but I live by it. Trouble.
Hello, John.
Hi, mate.
Thank you for that. I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed some music at the beginning of the day, so thank you very much for that. You made me think about sort of classical music. My wife's a musician, and I think about symphonies. And the thing about symphonies is they're made up of parts which have different speeds in them. And I think about our daily journey and our relationship with the environment around us. And we have some places where we want to be slow. We have some places where we want to be fast. We have some people who want to be slow in fast paces and some people who want to be fast in slow paces. And as designers, I just wonder, do we need to think not only about how we design spaces so they can be experiential when we're moving slowly, but how they can be experienced at a multitude of speeds? Because our ability to control the way that people interact with those spaces, and thinking about sort of piano and Boborg, or thinking about Louis Kahn and the Bangladesh Parliament building, the thing that strikes me is that they're designed with a variety of sort of scale that you can appreciate those spaces in different ways. And I wonder if we just have a need to sort of challenge our clients to give us those briefs to sort of create those spaces that can be experienced in those different types of way, not just slowing down, because we're not going to slow the world down.
Again, I'll reiterate, I think it's about a balance. And that is the key word today, not that it should be fast or slow. I think it's more about recalibrating the fast to be possibly more slow at times. I think cities are textured, and there are, in historical places, a lot of different mediated spaces in which you can be fast and places where you can be slow. And I don't necessarily believe that you can necessarily curate that to the nth degree. You can curate it to a way, and we have in the past looked at space as actually interesting, like a mixing desk on a sound system. So you can calibrate the speed at which things happen in different types of spaces by curating the edges in a particular way or offering opportunities in the middle in a different way. So I think clients are cognizant of that. I think they want spaces that are those sorts of things. I know that there's some very good clients, architects, that some are in this room now, who understand that very well. So I'm a little bit more optimistic and positive about that, possibly. I think we've moved into a place now where I think architecture, the real estate industry, and politicians are vaguely talking the same language. And I think we as professionals, sort of in the middle, mediating between all these different bits, can offer our 10 pence worth, essentially. I don't know whether that answers your question, because you said quite a lot of things, but anyway. Cheers, Andy.
I thought it was really provoking. And like many people, I loved the music. What a great start to the day. For me, I heard John talk about two topics. One is what we design, and one is how we design. I felt John made a very sort of polite call to clients to design more slowly. And I think, that's good. And especially, in the place we are now, where the buildings that we are building, will have to last for a very long time, and we're short on resources. Everything we do must count. So getting the design right, really important. So good call, absolutely. In terms of what we design, I think it's really important, yes, to design places where, we can be slow and we can stop and we can appreciate. I don't think we'll make the world go slower. So I think it's also important to, think about how places can work at multiple speeds, and how we can move through them fast and get something out of them, but how perhaps if we stop and slow down, we can discover them at an additional level of detail.
Well, first of all, the lecture on the art of slow is an enticing title, and I was really quite occupied with all the thoughts that he had in that. In practice, it's often a difficult matter. The Design Council advocated we should have more thinking time about our projects. What happens in practice is people get a job in, there's a deadline, there's a budget, and everything goes into a rush, and all the thinking time is squeezed out. And I think this is related to the cause at the moment that we should really value things for the value, not just the quick cost concept. So this is part of the value argument. And what John has said this morning, slower time means happier time, it means more thinking time, it means more consideration time, and the result must be that you get a deeper concept embedded into the design, which has real meaning.